Good stuff. We are in a sermon series here at Aldersgate called Who Wrote the Book on Love? And we're looking at the book that God gave us in the Bible. It talks about love and marriage and romance and sex. And we're going to be spending 5 weeks on this because our culture gives us so many different places to go and look. And in most of those places, it's all the wrong answers. And so we're turning to the right answer, and that's the book of Song of Solomon. Some of your Bibles will say Song of Songs. It's the book of Song of Solomon. And so I'm just going to invite you this morning to open up your Bible to the book of Song of Solomon. If you don't know where it is, go to the table of contents and find the page number. If you didn't bring a Bible with you, you'll find one there in the seats in front of you. Or just pull out your phone or your tablet or whatever and put in Song of Solomon. Just open up to chapter 1. Last week, we looked at this story and the attraction in the story. It's a story about a young man, Solomon, and his bride or his bride-to-be. And last week, Michael walked us through attraction and the attraction that you find in this story. And this morning, we're going to look into their dating. And we're actually going to go on a date with them. Now listen, because I know as soon as I say that, a lot of you are like, oh man, I kissed dating goodbye a long time ago. So this doesn't apply to me. It does apply to you. If you're here this morning and you are single, either single and never been married, or you're divorced or widowed and you're dating, it certainly applies to you. If you are married, just because we get married doesn't mean we're supposed to stop dating. And so, in fact, if you want a healthy, strong marriage, you need to keep dating. More on that later, so it applies to you. But even if you don't find yourself in any of those categories, it applies to you because all across the board in this entire series, it applies to relationships. And you can take any relationship in your life. Now, okay, minus when we talk about sex, you can take that out of it, all right? But any relationship in your life, and these principles that you learn that we're going to be teaching from the book of Song of Solomon, you can apply to any relationship in your life. So this applies to every single one of us in here today. Let me ask you a question as we talk about dating. Think back, recall a fantastic date that you had. Or a dating experience that just went well. I mean, just think back to that person, to that date. If it's not the person you're seated next to now, don't get too carried away, all right? But just think back to that, it was just a great date, or it's a great dating experience, and just spend some time there and all the memories that come back with that. And then I want you to transition your thinking to a date that was really bad. Like a dating experience. Again, if it's the person you're seated next to, don't get too carried away here, all right? But just think about a dating experience that was just bad, really bad. I'm going to tell a story on Amy, my wife, and a bad dating experience she had. Obviously, it wasn't with me. But in fact, I'll tell you a little bit about us. We kind of grew up together. We weren't high school sweethearts. We had a few dates in high school. We talked about that a little bit last night. But we didn't really start dating until after we both got out of high school. Our very first date, officially, after we got out of high school, was to mule putt in Muleshoe, Texas. It was a miniature golf course, and we had a great time. Obviously, I mean, you can see what happened, and so we had a great time. But she had a not-so-positive dating experience before that at another miniature golf course. It was actually the real, authentic putt-putt golf. You remember those? We used to have one here in Lubbock. And it was a blind date for her. Her cousin and her boyfriend invited Amy out with this guy. Amy had never met him before, didn't know anything about him. It was a blind date. She shows up with his camera. And he wants to take pictures of Amy everywhere they go and everything they do. And so they go to putt-putt. And you know how putt-putt is themed. So like every hole is a different theme, you know. So at every hole, he wanted Amy to pose next to the theme and get a picture. Creeper. And so, and then you remember the putt-putt mascot? The big orange golf ball, you remember? He showed up on the course in costume. This poor guy that was probably getting paid minimum wage to do that. And when he showed up, Amy's blind date said, oh, you have to get a picture with the golf ball. You have to get a picture with the mascot. And so Amy, because y'all all know Amy, she was very nice and kind, and she went over and stood next to the golf ball. And he was like, no, you got to hug the golf ball, hug the golf ball. So I'm sharing this story with you to tell you that when I asked her to go to mule putt, the bar was set very low. Lucky for me. we're going to peek in on a date that Solomon and his soon-to-be bride take. And so I want you to look in Song of Solomon, chapter 1, start reading in verse 7 with me. I'm reading out of the English Standard Version. This is her talking. This is the woman talking. And she says this, "Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where you pasture your flock, where you make it lie down at noon. For why should I be like one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions?" Do you see what's happening here? She is attracted to this guy and she is pursuing after him. That's what attraction does, right? When we're attracted to someone, we begin to pursue after them. And so she's asking, where are your flocks? Where do you keep your flocks? And where will you be at noon? Because noon was downtime. All the shepherds would kind of gather their sheep together and they would take a lunch break. And she's like, hey, at lunch, we can get together. We can eat lunch together. We can spend time together. We can have a date. Where will you be? She's pursuing him with this attraction. You notice that? And then look at what he does in verse 8. "If you do not know, O most beautiful among women, follow in the tracks of the flock and pasture your young goats beside the shepherd's tents." Do you see what he did there? He's flirting with her. You're attracted to me. I'm attracted to you. You know where I'll be. And you know I would love to spend the lunch hour with you. Bring your flocks there as well, and we will spend time together. There's this mutualness. There's this attraction that works both ways, and now they want to begin to date, and that works both ways. And dating has to work that way. There has to be give and take on both ends. There has to be both people wanting to pursue this attraction and follow through with this. And this is exactly what we see here. When we get married, this all changes. It's not supposed to, but it changes. And so this beautiful poetic justice here, I mean, when we get married, it changes, and it reads something like this. "Tell me, you whom my soul loves, where are you buying me lunch today?" And he responds, "Oh, I don't care. Where do you want to go to lunch today?" And she says, "I don't care. Where do you want to go to lunch?" Anybody else been there in this place? Like some of our biggest arguments are fighting over where we're going to go eat. One evening we were going to go eat. "Where do you want to go?" "I don't care. Where do you want to go?" "I really don't care." "Listen, Ryan, I really don't care. Wherever you take me will be fine." Okay, so we continue talking. I continue driving. I pull into the parking lot at Abuelo's because is there a better place in Lubbock? And Amy says, "I didn't really want to go here." What? You said you didn't care. "I know, but I really don't want to go here." Fine, you can go home and have a sandwich. So, it's mutual. The attraction is mutual. And they end up on this date, and watch what happens. Verse 9, this is him speaking to her on their date. We're watching this date, and this is him speaking to her. "I compare you, my love, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots." Did the dude just call her a horse? This happens a lot of places in Song of Solomon. It's a hard book to read. It's a beautiful book, but it's a hard book to read because it's written in this poetry from 3,000 years ago, and it's hard to read and understand. And it happens a lot of times in Song of Solomon. In fact, in chapter 4, on their wedding night, we will be there next week. The place will be packed, I guarantee you. We'll be there next week. On their wedding night, he says to her, "Your hair is like a flock of goats." Now, if you're single and you're planning on being married someday, men, I would challenge you not to say that to your bride on your wedding night. I am sure that the wedding activities would come to an end in a hurry if you said that her hair was like a flock of goats. But listen to what he's doing here. He is really speaking life into her. He's very much complimenting her and speaking life into here. I'm going to show you why. If you got Song of Solomon open, or if it's open on your phone, I don't think I'm going to put this up on the screen, but go back to verse 5. And their attraction that Michael walked us through last week, watch. This is how she described herself. And Michael challenges, hey, we're supposed to be gorgeous on the inside and the outside, right? And this is how she describes herself on the outside. In verse 5, she says, "I am very dark, like the tents of Kedar." And then in verse 6, "Do not gaze at me. Don't look at me because I'm dark. because the sun has looked upon me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I have not kept. Do you see what she's saying here? You guys all know in our day and age, people who spent just a little bit too much time in the tanning bed, right? You know what their skin looks like? Those that have spent just a little bit too much time with a little less clothing at the beach, right? She's saying she looks like that because her brothers made her tend the vineyards. And so her skin is burnt by the sun, and it's got that leathery. This is how she feels about herself. This culture, by the way, treasured or prized fair skin and very light skin. It's not like our culture today. Today, our culture, we tend to prize or treasure darker skin, right? I mean, if you're white and pasty, you need to be tan. Man, if you're white and pasty, you would have loved it 3,000 years ago because that was the end thing. They wanted you to look like that. And she's saying, I'm not fair-skinned. I'm not light-complected. I'm dark because of what the sun has done to me. The tents of Kedar, by the way, they were tents that were made out of goat's hair, black goat's hair. And she's saying, don't look at me because I'm not the prized possession in this culture. I'm dark. I'm not fair-complected. And here's what he speaks into her on their first date. He says, you're like a horse. What he really says is this: you're like a mare that Pharaoh has. Do you know something about Pharaoh's mares? They were these beautiful white Arabian horses. And he's saying to her, you're like one of those beautiful white Arabian horses that Pharaoh has. I grew up on a ranch, and I spent a lot of time around horses, had a lot of horses, rode a lot of horses. We had tons of horses, but one of the horses we had, she was this white mare, stunningly beautiful. And when we would have the horses out, especially out in pasture, and we would be going out to get the horses, a long time before we came up on them, she would be the first one we would spot because she stood out from the background. All the other horses, the sorrels, and all those that were different colors, they kind of blended in. But this white mare, man, she stood out. And you could see her from a long ways off. And that's what Solomon is saying to his date. Man, you stand out above all the rest. You are so stunning and beautiful that, man, you just shine above all the rest. Do you see what he's doing here? He is speaking life into her. He's not only speaking life into her, but he is meeting her at the place of one of her deepest insecurities, and he is speaking into that insecurity. He is speaking a positive light into a place in her life where she doesn't feel positive. He is giving life to her. And she returns the favor. If you keep going, you watch. Well, he kept saying, your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with strings of jewels. And then in verse 12, here's what she says. While the king was on his couch. Now, here's kind of what's happened. She's kind of daydreaming now, okay? And as she's daydreaming, she's thinking this about Solomon, and she's kind of returning the favor. You see what happens? When he spoke life into her, she couldn't help but speak life into him. And here's what she says. While the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance. Yowzers, I'll explain that in just a second, okay? My beloved is to me a sachet of myrrh that lies between my breasts. My beloved is to me a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-Gedi. The book of Song of Solomon is one of the most erotic books ever written, and it's contained in the Bible because God wants us to have this teaching. In fact, it was so erotic, Michael shared this with you last week, that young Jewish boys weren't even allowed to read the book. And this is nothing, because next week we're going to get to their wedding night. But what she's saying here is this. A nard was a leather pouch that was worn around a female's neck, around a rope or a chain or something like that, and it contained a special fragrance. This culture did not treasure hygiene as much as we do, primarily because they didn't have access to hygiene like we do. And so they would do these things to kind of cover up. It's like teenage boys and Axe deodorant, all right? And so they would... I have two, trust me, I know. And so they would wear this thing around their neck, and it would give off this fragrance. Listen, here's what she's saying. She's saying that Solomon is the fragrance of her life. that this guy that she's attracted to and she's beginning to pursue and wants to date, that he is the fragrance in her life. Do you see what's happening here? They are both speaking life into one another. Not only is their attraction mutual, not only is their dating mutual, but now their speaking life into one another is mutual. That they're both speaking life into one another. And that's what dating is. It's speaking life into one another. Listen to me. If you're here this morning and you are single and you are dating, and that person that you are dating is sucking you dry, if that person that you are dating is not speaking life into you, then you need to take caution with that. And here's why. Because when you're dating, the person you're dating and yourself, you're on your best behavior. You're trying to impress this person. You're trying to be your very best because you want to win this person over. And so when you're on your very best, if you're not able to speak life into someone when you're on your very best, it's not going to get any better. No, oh, well, he'll do better when we get married. Oh, well, she'll do this when we get married. Get that out of your mind right now because it's not going to happen. In fact, how many married people would say here, it's only going to get worse? And now I need to talk to the married people because it's not supposed to get worse. It's only supposed to get better. You see, when we're married, sometimes life sucks the life out of us, doesn't it? I mean, now we have all these responsibilities, and we've got our careers to focus on, and we've got our kids to focus on, and we spend most of our time with small talk. Who's going to get this one here, and who's going to pick this one up here, and who's going to take care of this job responsibility? And all of those things begin to drain us. And before long, we look up, and we realize that as a married couple, we've lost speaking life into one another. We've lost those conversations where we just look into each other's eyes and speak life into the person we're married to. And if we're not careful, one day we look up and we realize we're just two roommates sharing a house together. We look up and we realize we're like a butler and a maid who share a bed. And we think that we're close to each other because we're in the same bed together. We're in the same bedroom, in the same bathroom, in the same kitchen, in the same house. We're in the same car together. But we're not really close to each other. We're just close by each other. And what's happened is we forgot to date. We forgot the romance. We forgot to speak life into one another. And dating must involve speaking life into the other person. Not only that, I want to back up just a second because I skipped a verse. I skipped verse 11. You know what? Before I go on to verse 11, I try to share as much as I can with you from my own personal life. So let me just do that. Amy and I, 22 years, it'll be 22 years this summer. And so, 22 years, we've learned through the 22 years, there's been lots of different seasons. And during those seasons, we've had to work at different things to help us keep the romance, to help us be able to spend that quality time talking where it's not just about who's going to pick the boys up and who's going to take them where and who's, it's your kids, my kid, all that kind of stuff. And so we've tried to do this thing. When we were early married without kids, man, we took it for granted, but you could just go out to eat and you could go to a movie. Not really because we were poor college kids. We didn't have money to do that all the time, and so we had to be really creative with how we did that. And then kids came along, and man, things just get a lot more challenging. Now when we went out to eat or went to a movie, we had to leave them in the car. You didn't really know what to do with them, and so it was a little, that explains a lot. It was a little more challenging, and so, and then as they started to get older, this is one of our favorite seasons in life, 9:00 p.m. We jokingly refer to it as the best time of the day. We were done with work. We were done with all the responsibilities. The kids were in bed. That was our time to talk, not about all the other small talk issues, but to go deeper and to talk, to really talk. And now that our kids are getting older, our boys are getting older, we found more challenges with that because we're getting older. They stay up later than we do. And so 9:00 is no longer, we're still going at 9:00. And so Amy wrote a blog not too long ago. She's a fabulous writer. You should really follow her. You can follow it on Facebook. But she wrote a blog titled, How a Bagel Saved My Marriage. And what we've done now in this season of our life is we've tried to set aside Saturday mornings, because with our crazy weeks and all the things that are going on, Saturday mornings seems to be one of the times the boys don't care to be active on Saturday mornings most of the time. And so that's one of the times that we have. Now, a lot of times things come up, but we try to save Saturday mornings just for us. And I don't know why. I'm a routine person, but we've got into this habit of Saturday mornings, we have a date at Einstein's Bagels on 82nd and Slide. If you come there most Saturday mornings, you will find us there. We won't talk to you, but you will find us there. Actually, that's not true. Amy will talk to you. But that's what we've done. And if you're married and you're sitting here this morning, and I just want to encourage you, you have to do that. You have to find ways to get past the small talk. You have to find ways to get to the places where you can give life to the other person and not just take all the time. I'm going to show you one more thing about dating. I skipped this verse 11. This is their friends. This is Solomon and the bride. This is their friends speaking. By the way, let me address that. Song of Solomon is a book of poetry. It's written with 3 different voices. There's Solomon's voice, there's his bride's voice, and then there's their friend's voice. When you're reading the Song of Solomon, you really need to get a translation of the Bible where it tells you who's speaking. I can't follow this poetry. It's hard enough if I know who's speaking to follow it. You really need to get a translation, because my translation here, it says he, she, and others. And so verse 11, it's others. And here's what they say. We will make for you ornaments of gold studded with silver. Now that may not sound like a whole lot on the surface, but let me tell you what's happening here. The others are friends in their lives that they consider godly counsel. That they consider good wisdom givers and advice givers. And they've got the blessing of the others in their life. Their mutual dating relationship has the blessing of the godly counsel in their lives. Here's the point. If your dating relationships or something currently happening in your marriage or any other relationship does not have the agreement of your godly counselors, watch out. Listen, if you're single and dating, and the godly counselors in your life, your parents, your friends, anyone you look up to, do not give blessings to your dating relationships, get out of it. Because the godly counselors are in your life for a reason. And listen, don't go to other counselors and find yes men who will say, yes, I bless what you're doing. God has given you parents and godly counselors for a reason. Listen to them. Listen to them, and it will save you heartache. All of us, the Bible from one end to the other speaks about how we should have godly counselors in our lives. And we should look for people not who will just tell us what we want to hear, but tell us the truth. And any relationship in our life, we need godly counsel to bless it. And if it's not blessed by godly counselors, get out. All right, I'll move on. Last part. We're actually going to get to the date, well, more of the date. Verse 16. She's speaking again. Behold, you are beautiful, my beloved, truly delightful. Our couch is green. Our beams of the house are cedar. Our rafters are pine. Now, our couches here are red. But I'm going to use the couches to tell you what's happening in this part of their date. All of you have been in a place, probably, whether you're just now dating or whether you've been dating for a long time, you're married, whatever, where you've had the opportunity to say to the person you're dating, you know what, I don't really want to go out tonight. This especially outside the context of marriage. I don't really want to go out tonight. Let's stay home on the couch where it's dark and let's watch a movie. Let's get a movie off of Apple TV, or let's go to Redbox, and let's just hang out here by ourselves with no one else around. That is a recipe for disaster. And I'll show you what happens. And I'm not going to show you what happens, but I'm going to invite Michael and Natalie up to sit on the red couch. Michael is our student pastor, and this is his beautiful bride, Natalie. And they're married, so whatever happens up here stays up here. And they're going to demonstrate to us what happens when we put ourselves in this situation.
All right, Michael, play it cool, play it cool. Hey, I'm gonna put the movie in. I'm excited about this movie. It's gonna be good. Um, hey, you want something to drink? Okay. Yeah. Okay, this is a good idea. Get a little closer next time. A little bit closer. There you go. All right. So I learned something really cool the other day. Did you know that it's the same distance from here to here as it is from here to here? This is a good movie right here. Whew. Whew. Yeah, I learned something else the other day. So did you know that all of us have unique hands? Like let me see. Yeah, it's like we all have unique hands, and that sometimes they come together like this. Your hands are really cold. Are you cold? Okay. I'll be right back.
Okay, I don't know where this is going, but I don't feel. I think we're done with this. So give them a hand. Michael still got responsibilities, so please make sure they don't leave right now. Appreciate that very much. They're married, but another time, another place. All right. But you see what happens, right? We all know this. Michael refers to it as the law of diminishing returns. That once you take one step, that same step doesn't give you the same high, and so you have to go a deeper place to get the same high again. The law of diminishing returns. And so what's so important here that Solomon and his bride share in Scripture is she says, our couch is green. Do you know what she's saying? She's saying, we're outside. It's the bushes, it's the grass, but they've put themselves in a public setting. They've drawn boundaries so that this doesn't happen in a dark house all by yourself on a couch that you shouldn't be on. You see what's happening here? She's saying we're going to do something to keep our dating relationship pure. Now, I want to speak to this because I think the church has done a really, really, really horrible injustice here. And when we teach on this, especially in the context of singles or dating, we teach it in such a way that when we say, okay, you put your arm around her and then you touched her leg and you held hands, and that's bad, 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 bad. That's what the church is taught. Can I share something with you this morning? That's not bad. That's how God wired us. That's how God created us. He created us to have these desires and to want to have them fulfilled and to experience the pleasure from these desires. But listen, He wants us to experience that pleasure to the fullest in the context of marriage. And the way we experience that pleasure to its fullest in the context of marriage is to keep our dating relationships pure. To set boundaries that say, I'm not going to go past this point. I'm not going to. And you know what? It's so much easier. People just want to, well, okay, how far is too? You can't do that. You're made different than everybody else. You have to see what that is for you. And for you as a couple. Listen, I think this is why it's so important what she says here. She's describing the couch as green, and then she's talking about this pine and all this kind of stuff. And here's what she's telling us. She's telling us this, that Solomon took the initiative. It was his idea to be outside in public. It was his idea to be underneath the rafters and to be under the pine. It was all his idea. He set this up. And listen to me, guys. Listen to me, men. Oftentimes, because of the way God created us, it's not wrong. Thank God it's not wrong. That's how God created us. But because of that, oftentimes we're the ones who push too far and take things too far. And what she's saying here is that she is so lucky and blessed to be in a dating relationship with someone who understands that and has put boundaries in place. And has said, this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to be. Guys, I can't encourage you enough. If you're single and you're dating, put those boundaries into place. You do them. And ladies, I can't encourage you enough. If you're single and you're dating, don't date a guy who's not willing to put those boundaries into place. And if you're married, can I speak into you for just a second? Husbands, take the lead. Take the initiative. If you're dissatisfied with the intimacy in your marriage, if you're not happy with the romance in your marriage, don't blame everything on her. You step up and be the husband that God called you to be. You lead the intimacy. You lead the romance. You take the initiative. It's all on you. Listen, we're going to be in this book for 3 more weeks. It's an incredible book. We're going to talk next week about intimacy, sexual intimacy. Bring a friend. I guarantee you they won't be bored. The week after that, we're going to talk about conflict. Bring a friend. I guarantee you they won't be bored. The week after that, we're going to talk about, well, actually Mother's Day is after that. And then the week after that, we're going to talk about commitment. And we're going to see what God has to say to us about love and dating and marriage and romance and sex. Here's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to close up. The band's going to come back up. As they do that, here's what I want you to do. If you're in this room this morning and you are single, I want you to just sit for a while as the band begins to play. I just want you to be with your thoughts for a little bit. Where do you find your dating experience and your dating relationships? If you're pursuing someone, is it mutual? Is it life-giving? Are you speaking life into that person? Are they speaking life into you? Do you have the blessing of godly counsel in your lives? And are you doing things to take steps to keep yourself pure? If you're here this morning and you're married, I can take the same principles and speak to you. Is your marriage a mutual marriage right now? Are you both giving? Are you both speaking life into each other? Are you taking time and carving out time where you can have those conversations and you can just have that time together where you're truly speaking life into one another? Are you leaning on the godly counsel? If you're stuck in a place or need counsel or advice, are you leaning into godly people in your life? And are you doing everything you can to keep the romance alive in your marriage? To keep the intimacy pure and alive in your marriage? If you're here this morning and you don't fall into any of those categories, I can still speak to you. In all of your relationships, are they mutual? Are they life-giving? Do you have the counsel of godly people speaking into those relationships? Are they pure? You can take any relationship and fit it into those principles. And so this morning, what we're going to do is we're just going to close with a song. We would invite you to sit, stand, whatever. You can come to the altar. It'll be open. But we just want you to lean into your relationships right now. Dating relationships, regular relationships, marriage relationships, and see what God has to speak into you today. If you're single, maybe you want to come to the altar or just spend some time with that commitment of all of these things we've talked about. If you're married, husbands, if you're here this morning and your wife is with you, can you just do something this morning to be romantic? Do you know that praying with your wife is the most intimate thing you can do? We're going to talk about that next week and why it's so dangerous outside the context of marriage. Do something this morning. Let God speak into you. God, we thank you so much for this time this morning. We thank you for this book, and we thank you that you gave it to us, not to be laughed at, but to be imitated. To glean these principles that you're going to speak into our lives, into our relationships, into our marriages, and help us to imitate them. And so, God, this morning I pray over all the singles in this room that you would move in their hearts and work in their lives this morning. God, I pray over all the married couples in this room that you would work in their lives and move in their hearts. And for all of us in all of our relationships, we are yours. Do your work. In Jesus' name.